today we have John Knowlton with us. John and I go way back. John was my instructor and supervisor at my first college, Green River College, and amazing person, very supportive. He has been there in all the hard times when we were working with the newspaper, and vast experience when it comes to journalism. Has worked with ton of students. So, John, I think if you want to let the audience know a little bit about yourself, your background, and yeah.
Okay, I'd be happy to do that. I worked, oh gosh, I think 16 years, 18 years as a professional journalist for everything from my college newspaper at the University of Oregon. You can see the big O up here on my hat, to the Wall Street Journal. So, and I started my own company targeting the work from home movement. This was well before the pandemic forced the world to adopt that work style. But I was one of the earlier ones. I started a publication in the Portland, Vancouver area called Home-Based Business News. It was acquired by a company called Media America, relaunched as Business at Home magazine, that we ran that for probably 5 years. The advertising market never really took off there, so we eventually shut it down. By that time, I had transitioned from journalist to journalism educator with teaching at the University of Oregon before I was hired up at Green River Community College up in Auburn, where I met you. So I have. I'm finishing up my 22nd year at Green River. I have another couple of years, 2 to 3 years of teaching. So I got about 25 years of journalism experience and journalism education experience, and 16 to 18 years of professional journalism experience.
It's awesome. And John, I'm wondering, you have such a diverse experience. What has been your favorite part so far? What role did you enjoy the most?
I like the instructing. I like teaching. I've always enjoyed the tutorial aspects of being an editor, where you work with young reporters and photographers and copy desk people, improving their skills and then tracking their personal and professional development as they move out into the industry. And that transfers nicely to a classroom setting. So yeah. I've enjoyed working with people, being patient with them, helping them improve their skills, and tracking their personal and professional development in the real world, just like I'm doing with you, young man.
Definitely. And I mean, I'm sure that, so many students would have benefited from that. I remember when I was at the Corinne, there were certain nuances that I think that a lot of people who are entering journalism for the first time, I didn't have any journalism background at all, right? Mm-hmm. So having that practical eye towards things is what I think you really brought into the team. I remember that. So that was very helpful. And like you just mentioned, helping students and young people just get into young reporters specifically. So that's really good. That's really awesome. I'm sure that, I can see why that would be a thrilling aspect, because there's always something new is happening in that regards, right? So based on your experience as a journalist instructor, what aspect of journalism do you think students particularly have a need to look at in today's time? Considering that the world has changed drastically in the last 30-40 years, especially in the last 10 years, if you look at technology, right? The ways of reporting have changed. I mean, we can go on and on about talking about how social media has impacted journalism as well. And then there are YouTube reporters, and also what has been based on these many years of experience, what kind of journey have you seen for journalism, and how do you see it going forward?
I'm asked that question quite a bit, and I got to tell you, I'm not optimistic. I mean, when the founding fathers created the America, the idea was that people would all have access to good information, make decisions based on the marketplace of ideas that exists here, and society would benefit in terms of electing people to the local school board, or the city council or the governor or the U.S. senator or the president. And the premise there
Yeah.
was that there's good information. People are basing the decision on good information. But the founding fathers did not anticipate misinformation, deliberate disinformation, and not only from foreign countries, but from our own ilk, our own journalists are polluting the information ecosphere. And so the biggest challenge really is media literacy. And it's got to start early. It's got to start, in sixth and seventh grade.
Yeah.
Kids begin to connect the dots about how the world really works. That's where you need to be there with media literacy instruction about what can you believe, what is your real world like compared to the world that's represented on television or in social media or in
Yeah.
movies or whatever, and teach kids that they have to make a distinction between the real authentic world. I would pound my knuckles on a desk right now if I were sitting at a desk, or a mediated world that is built on the best sound bites, the best clips, and the best this and the best that. So that is troubling to me. And it's going to need a huge media literacy campaign. But in countries like the US, one government can propose it, then the other is going to be fighting and opposing it back and forth. And it's going to be very difficult to try to arrive at a particular curriculum that everybody or most people can agree to that will improve media literacy among the young people in this country.
Yeah, makes sense. I think like that's a very big point, and it's extremely necessary today because I think people have kind of become indifferent towards, like, there's just so much coming in that some days there's like their attention spans have reduced. Someday something's going to be important, and maybe 2 days later people have forgotten about it, right?
Yeah, that's right. And you mentioned indifference. The biggest danger to democracy is indifference. People just say, "Oh, screw it. I don't really care."
Yeah.
They're so awash in information. They don't know what to believe. And so it's going to be difficult. I give President Biden all kinds of credit for doing what presidents are supposed to do, and swimming upstream against pseudo-journalism that we see in Fox and Newsmax and all those other entities. And pseudo-journalism, by the way, some people keep asking, what is pseudo-journalism? And I just say pseudo-journalism regards the public not as a master to be served, but as something to be manipulated.
Hmm.
And that's what Fox News does. And they know it.
Yeah.
It's out in the Dominion trial that they have openly said privately, they know that Trump was lost the election, but they will get out there and beat the drum saying, no, it was fake, to drive their stock price and help their own financial well-being, not serve the public.
Yeah. And I think the instances of these things happening has actually increased. And it's not just like, even coming from India, like India is facing something very similar right now, where the press freedom index has reduced drastically in the past few years, and similar problems, people becoming, like, attention spans are reducing. They're not putting enough, like, there's not a lot of value remaining in good journalism for a lot of people, like especially youngsters. And I'll actually, like, I did have one question regarding that, because, like, coming from a generation where people are talking a lot about personal well-being, and a lot of times I keep hearing from people that stay away from news, like, don't look at news because it's not good for your mental health. Like, you'll always be seeing propaganda, or you'll be seeing negative things happening around the world. But, like, what's your opinion on this, that when people suggest things like that?
I had a very real example of that just the other day. I went to a supermarket Sunday, picked up a Seattle Times, and somebody said, where do you go for good news, for real news? And I said, I read the Seattle Times. And I said, people here don't realize how lucky they are to have a newspaper that is not owned by a corporation that it requires news departments to achieve net operating income and profit margin, but believes journalists should be truth tellers and truth seekers. And they don't realize how lucky they are. But it's so easy to be anti-media, condemn the media. It's kind of a popular thing to do these days.
Yep.
And so I just said, I said my piece and then I left. I don't suppose I changed anybody's mind, but so that is something that we all have to deal with. And even though I know that the trend is toward disinformation and misinformation in the journalism sphere, I always beat the drum. Fairness, accuracy. You're working for the public. That is the mission. That's the goal here: is to be a public servant, a truth teller, a truth seeker. And I retire June 16th, and I'm going to beat that drum until I retire, and afterwards too. But I don't have an answer. I think education, mass media literacy will help, but in our system of government, Congress can make no law abridging the freedom of speech and of the press. And so you can't just say, all right, from now on, newspaper or broadcast, you have to follow these standards. You have to, have two sources for everything that you broadcast, and because that'll be thrown out by the courts in half a heartbeat. So I don't have an answer to that very difficult question, very thoughtful question. But I'm going to keep doing what I have been doing among my friends and contacts, even as a retired journalist and journalism educator. And I am glad that it looks like Dominion is going to win their lawsuit against Fox News. And there's another one that's waiting in the wings, going after Fox News because of their unethical journalistic conduct. But again, it's not a requirement. It's not a legal requirement that you tell the truth.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I hope that helps, but I'm not sure that it will in the long run.
Definitely. So we primarily work with high school students, right? And I think at Greenwood College, like a lot of students are mostly first year and second year students, right? So based on your experience as an instructor, what are some of the biggest challenges that you have noticed students face who want to enter journalism as a career? Like, what would you suggest to them?
Well, I in my time here at Green River College, I didn't train journalists. I taught journalism skills. And the most important things that kids can learn today is how to write correctly and clearly, how to gather information quickly, how to distinguish what's important from what's unimportant, how to write for print, for the web, do a radio spot and a TV spot. So you are, if you're a baseball fan, you're a utility infielder. You have several different skills that are transferable. You can go to work for a company and manage their website, write press releases, do interviews, arrange interviews. So you are a one-stop shopping center, to mix my metaphors. So teaching journalism skills is my concentration of in journalism education and updating. We changed our journalism offerings to include, you can get an AA with a concentration in digital broadcast media, because that's where everything is going. Print is dead unless you are at a big university and can take magazine journalism narrative style. They have the resources to do that. We don't. We are, we're giving them enough information that we hope will spark something in them and make them want to go and get more, learn more practical kinds of stuff. So So we teach journalism skills, and looking out in across the economic landscape. If you have some of those skills that I mentioned, you're very employable, and you don't need to go to work for a news organization. Corporation X needs somebody that does that, that can write, can gather information quickly, has analytical skills, can communicate through various formats. Uh, so those are kind of, you know, not just journalism skills, but employment skills that you need in today's increasingly digital work style.
Exactly. And I think like that point that you mentioned, I was actually going to ask you about that because I personally like when I was working at the current and I think I took journalism 101 with you. Um, a lot of the skills that I gained from that position, whether it was through ads or whether it was opinion, right, op-ed or like, I think like even though I didn't really build a career in journalism as such, but like right now when I work with students, whenever I'm communicating with people, even when I'm running a business, right, communication as a factor has become like so much more intuitive because of those experiences, right? Like when you are reporting something, when you are writing articles for others to read, you are actually creating a medium to interact with people that you don't know, right?
Mhm.
Like your readers are people that are invisible to you, and I think that like having that skill of being able to communicate information in the correct manner, in an efficient manner, is a very transferable skill across different mediums, right?
I mean,
So
former journalists are employed across the economic spectrum: politics, economics, science, you name it. And it's because the skills that they learned and practiced as a journalism professional.
yeah, exactly. So John, you mentioned that you're retiring in June. What are your plans after retirement?
I want to spend time fishing and boating and shrimping and crabbing, time on the water. I moved to Whidbey Island, so I live on Whidbey Island now.
Oh, nice.
And I
Where
love
exactly is that?
Whidbey Island is about 20 miles northwest of Seattle, in
Got
kind of northern Puget Sound. And you go across the Strait of Juan de Fuca, and you're in the San Juan Islands. So
it.
my sister lives here. I have nieces and nephews that live here. It's
Mhm.
really good to be around family and a wonderful, fascinating lifestyle here on Whidbey Island. They call it the People's Republic of Whidbey. So
Oh, nice.
it's kind of got a different vibe to it, and I really enjoy it. So I
That's
plan to
nice.
answer your question. I plan to, spend time outdoors, enjoying the world. I'd like to take my boat up to Alaska and back. I want to circumnavigate Vancouver Island, those kinds of things. I may want to do something else. I'm not quite sure if I want to get into some creative writing, some fiction. I'm just not sure. I might
Yeah,
continue to
I'm looking
be
forward
an
to
ed.
that.
Huh?
If you start writing a book, I would definitely be one of the first readers.
Okay. All right. So yeah, so it's kind of up in the air at this point, but I kind of have a general shift of where I want to go and what I want to do.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Any like advice that you would give to people who are finding it challenging to adjust to the environments that have been created in today's political scenario or today's general scenario, like whether it comes to education, whether it comes to personal life. I think there's like a lot of change in philosophies happening with the advent of technology as well. Like just recently, I think just yesterday, GPT-4 was announced by Microsoft. So like it's changing the world entirely. So like there's a lot of shift happening in a lot of places. So what would you advise to people like me, for example, right? That this is what you need to do, or this is what you should consider. Um,
Well, I think that there are certainly all kinds of changes in platforms of delivering information and stuff, but but even though there's a huge change in the landscape, I think people need to follow their own moral compass and moral guides about what's right and what's wrong in this world, because there's a
mhm.
lot of temptation. I have a little character who sits on my shoulder. I call him the little professor. And when I'm thinking about doing something or other, he will lean up and whisper into my ear, are you sure that's the right thing to do here? And so I listened to the little professor. So I encourage people to follow their own correct moral compass and do the right thing. Always do the right thing. It may not be popular among your friends, your clique at a particular time, but in history will judge you correctly and fairly if you do the right thing. So that would be my suggestion. My guide is always do the right thing. Listen to you, the little professor who's perched
Yeah.
on the shoulder, whispering in your ear. Is that the right thing to do?
Makes sense. Makes sense. You, as a professor, have your own little professor with you. Nice.